To understand Candide, you got to accept a few things. Number one, it is funny. You are allowed to laugh. You are expected to laugh. And if there are moments when you're first getting into it where you're not sure, that seems kind of silly, it is. It is very, very silly. The joke count in this piece is off the charts. Pretty much every line of this book, of this narrative, of this novella, whatever you want to call it, pretty much every line is in some form or another, whether you get it or not, a joke. Late night comics can't have that level of penetration, can't have that level of density. This book does. It packs the humor in. It is hilarious. It is at the same time savage, because they're not, harmless little knock-knock jokes or anything. These are really biting, hysterical satires of human beings, of human behavior, and the silliness that we believe in our lives. And the reason it has been so incredibly popular for so long, it's been in almost continual publication, I believe, since its first printing, is a testament to that. People just love this, and it's a fun piece. You can walk away from everything else that we read here, and it might just sort of drift away. This one lands because it's so easy, it's so funny, and it's just a pleasure from top to bottom. You don't have to get everything. There are a lot of aspects of this that can leave you scratching, and from time to time, yeah, we all need those footnotes. But if we just go with that, if we just allow ourselves that fleeting uncertainty here and there, we can really appreciate the other stuff, the humanity of it, the humor of it, and the real wisdom of it buried underneath all of that. It's not just being jokey, it's making a consistent point throughout. And that is, I would say, almost unparalleled in its execution in the history of literature, considering the brevity and the swiftness of this piece. The style of it and the content of it are very indicative of the era. The travel narrative that we see, where this is basically a travel narrative, had been growing in popularity for quite some time. You had very similar stories in Montesquieu's Persian Letters, 1721, Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, 1726, Samuel Johnson's Rasselas, 1759, and maybe even Voltaire's own story Zadig in 1747. They're all other notable examples. All suggest a growing fascination with, an enticement with, or enticement by travel. Travel as roads, canals, horse carriages, coaches, and ships, and navigation tools are all really developing in the scientific age, in the Enlightenment, the age of reason. All of these things are getting better, and so people are able to get around a lot easier. They are traveling more, traveling for enjoyment, traveling for recreation, not just because they have to go travel for business or something like that. There is a huge blooming travel industry that is cropping up as well as capitalism takes root, and capitalism slowly builds the middle class. The bourgeoisie is got some extra cash on hand, and so that they can go on these extended trips that they can justify as being more than just, getting away from it all, but trips that are supposed to be enlightening, trips that are supposed to be educational, trips that are going to make you a better person because you are coming into contact with different people. And that, in turn, gives you a kind of sophistication. And you can say many things about the art and literature of the Enlightenment, but it is above all else a very sophisticated style. Everybody is very urbane. Everybody is very highly educated. Everybody values their thoughts and the cultivation of very refined thoughts. And even in silly, jokey moments, there is an undercurrent of thoughtfulness going on there. These are not country rubes. These are not silly little goofballs. These are very sophisticated, educated, upper crust, generally also upper class, because they do have, this is fueled by money, this is fueled by their bourgeois tastes. But all of this is coming to fruition at a very rich time in human society. The sophistication of their perspective lets them do an awful lot of comparison. They can set themselves apart from their own culture by thinking about, well, okay, they do something a little different. We in our little village over here, we do things this way, but I have traveled, so I have traveled to that village over there, and I've noticed they do things a little different over there. And so now I am almost godlike in my ability to say, well, they do things one way and we do things another, and maybe there's some crossover there, and we have this relativistic attitude. It's not that we are right and they are wrong. It's that, well, some things can be right and some things can be wrong. That relativism puts the individual in a position of divine perspective, a kind of faux objectivity that says that, well, no, I'm not just one person amid the group, I am above the group, and so I can judge them. You know, it always feels good to do that. But when you do that, you are in a way impersonating God. You are dislodging the whole idea of a universal divine intelligence and imposing your own particular intelligence in its place. And that intelligence assumes the role of universality like God. That's a dangerous perspective to be in, because here man assumes the role of God. Things tend to not go so well in those instances. The perspective that Voltaire brings to the Enlightenment here, very much, I would say, like Swift, is that it is the Enlightenment method turned on itself. It is the Counter-Enlightenment is one term for it, where that critical inquiry, that judging capacity that so characterizes Enlightenment art and culture suddenly considers, well, what is the value of reason? What is the value of thought? What are we really? Are we godlike? Isn't that getting carried away? These questions are seeping in and causing many thinkers of the day to realize that maybe we've taken this faith in our own capacity for thought a little too far. We are not gods. We are deeply, deeply flawed. And when we think we're gods, well, that's usually when we expose our greatest flaws. And so Candide is an exploration of that tendency, that tendency towards self-exaltation that if you just step back from that a little bit more, becomes self-critique. It's culture essentially trying to rein in the biggest egotists of the age, which is always fun, because the biggest egotists are usually the biggest jackasses, quite frankly. And you can see this vein of critique running through everything in this book. Well, the beginning, always look at beginnings and endings. The beginning tells you how to read it. And it's always troubling when you first open up a book and start looking, one word after the other. Oh, I don't really know. I don't really get this, or, well, what is it? You got to hear the voice. You got to lean in and try and say, what, is this guy serious? What's going on? Give it, just plow into it, quite frankly. Like everything else, sometimes you just have to jump in and see what you can make of it. And in that, I think this book is particularly skilled at telling you very early on how to make sense of this. What is the tone? And just consider how it starts. There lived in Westphalia, in the castle of Baron Thunderdentrunk, a young man on whom nature had bestowed the perfection of gentle manners. Right there, first sentence. Could start a book anyway. He chose this way, one sentence. There lived in Westphalia. For those of you who don't know Germany particularly well, you can be forgiven. Westphalia is in Western Germany. It is the Nebraska, the Kansas of the German land. It is a lot of relatively dull landscape. It's farmland, essentially. And for a dazzling urbanite like Voltaire, it is nowhere. It is, the armpit of Europe, as he might call it, because Voltaire is used to very rich capitals and castles, and he hobnobs with the most sophisticated people of his day, emperors and the like. And so to be in, Podunkville, Germany, is automatically saying something for him. So he starts out like that. In the castle of the Baron of Thunderdentrunk, which is just a stupid name, and it's supposed to be stupid, a young man on whom nature had bestowed the perfection of gentle manners. Oh, that makes him sound so refined, right? And the perfection of, when you start with somebody that you're told in the very first sentence is perfect, chances are that character is going to go through some stuff, to use a common locution there. And also, what is he perfect at? Manners. Manners, gentle manners, gentlemanly manners. This has nothing to do with what is going on inside. This doesn't even say that he is a gentleman. He has bestowed the perfection of gentle manners. So his exterior, his appearance, his superficial qualities all seem gentlemanly. His features admirably expressed his soul. He combined an honest mind with great simplicity of heart, and I think it was for this reason that they called him Candide, like Candid. Get it? The old servants of the house suspected that he was the son of the Baron's sister, by a respectable, honest gentleman of the neighborhood, whom she had refused to marry because he could prove only 71 quarterings, the rest of his family tree having been lost in the passage of time. He is an illegitimate child. They don't really know who his parents are. He's just living in this house. Possibly the son of the Baron's sister. Stick that in your head for what's coming up. And the Baron's sister supposedly refused to marry someone because they were not noble enough. Now, you don't have to know what 71 quarterings are. I don't. But there is in the ranks of nobility the idea of, well, there's the purest of the purebloods, and then after that it gets a little, oh, well, that one married this one, and, it's getting a little questionable, and that one, they lost all their money, so, who really cares? Those are all these calculations of society that are clouding up. Again, nothing to do with the inner values of this person, the inner quality of this person. It is all about his superficial attributes. The Baron was one of the most mighty lords of Westphalia. Again, it's like being mayor of a small town in Nebraska. For his castle had a door and windows. Come on, that's funny. You don't have to know about 71 quarterings anymore. You don't have to know about the geography of Western Germany. But the castle has a door and windows, and so it is significant. His great hall was even hung with a tapestry. A great hall in most European castles will have many, many tapestries, so a tapestry is suddenly, The dogs of his courtyard were made up a hunting pack on occasion, with the stable boys as huntsmen. The village priest was his good almoner. They all called him my lord and laughed at his stories. If the proof of your greatness is that you have a staff or a immediate social circle that just calls you my lord and laughs at your stories, that also just seems kind of hollow to me. The Baroness, who weighed in the neighborhood of 350 pounds, was greatly respected for that reason and did the honors of the house with a dignity which rendered her even more imposing. That's a big gal. Her daughter, Cunigond, aged 17, was a ruddy-cheeked girl, fresh, plump, and desirable. The Baron's son seemed in every way worthy of his father. That seems like damning with faint praise to me. The tutor Pangloss was an oracle of the household, and little Candide listened to his lectures with all the good faith of his age and character. So this is quite the cast of characters here. This is a curious assemblage of mediocrities, is what we're being shown here. Pangloss gave instruction in medico, physico, theologico, cosmolunigology. That's a big made-up word if you didn't get the hint. It's not subtle. He proved admirably that there cannot be an effect without a cause, and that in this best of all possible worlds, the Baron's castle was the best of all castles, and his wife the best of all possible baronesses. Now, the reference to Pangloss and the best of all possible worlds, the idea of optimism, which is the subtitle of this book, or the alternate title of this book, the optimism. This is a somewhat direct attack on a popular philosopher of the day, a fellow German named Leibniz. Voltaire is taking a lot of liberties with how he is characterizing Leibniz's work, and we don't need to go into that. But the idea is that Pangloss constructs elaborate justifications for how things are, even if it is awful. All of the evidence of suffering in the world is somehow reconstrued to mean that, well, everything is perfect. Everything is as God intends, so it is therefore perfect. And the disjuncture between this abstract thought and the reality that people see around them is constantly being hammered into this story. "It is clear," said he, "that things cannot be otherwise than they are, for since everything is made to serve an end, everything necessarily serves the best end. Observe, noses were made to support spectacles, hence we have spectacles." Legs, as anyone can plainly see, were made to be breeched, and so we have breeches. Stones were made to be shaped and built and to build castles with. Thus, my lord has a fine castle, for the greatest baron in the province should have the finest house, and since pigs were made to be eaten, we eat pork all year round. Consequently, those who say everything is well are uttering mere stupidities. They should say everything is for the best. Again, those who just go halfway and are lukewarm and, cautious with what they're saying, they're dumb. You need to go all out. You need to go all out and commit to everything is the best. Exaggerate. Push it into a level of absurdity, which is what this book does. Candide listened attentively and believed implicitly, for he found Miss Cunegonde exceedingly pretty, though he never had the courage to tell her so. Remember, if he is the daughter of the Baron, or if he is the son of the Baron's sister, Cunegonde is the daughter of the Baron. That makes them first cousins, which even for that age is a little close in the gene pool. Little context clues here. He decided that after the happiness of being born Baron of Thunder Ten Trunk, the second order of happiness was to be Miss Cunegonde. The third was seeing her every day, and the fourth was listening to Mr. Pangloss. Notice the organization of his mind, but it's all stupid. The greatest philosopher in the province, and consequently in the entire world. Again, the confidence of this small town construction. Has he really explored other philosophers? Has he really had any contact with anyone outside of this very small castle in this very remote province? No, he's led a very narrow life up to this point. He's only a teenager himself. One day, while Cunegonde was walking near the castle in the little woods that they called a park, little snide shot right there, she saw Dr. Pangloss in the underbrush. He was giving a lesson in experimental physics to her mother's maid, a very attractive and obedient brunette. As Miss Cunegonde had a natural bent for the sciences, she watched breathlessly the repeated experiments which were going on. She saw clearly the doctor's sufficient reason, which is a term that Leibniz comes up with. We don't need to go into it. Observed both cause and effect, another bugbear of Leibniz's thought and the thought of that era in general, and returned to the house in a distracted and pensive frame of mind, yearning for knowledge and dreaming that she might be the sufficient reason of young Candide, who might also be hers. Pangloss was making a little nookie with the maid in the bushes. Cunegonde sees him, and in her young, very pure mind, doesn't really know what to do with this information, and it's stirring her in some disturbing ways, and she's getting the warm feelies, let's say. As she was returning to the castle, she met Candide and blushed. Candide blushed too. She greeted him in a faltering tone of voice, and Candide talked to her without knowing what he was saying. Next day, as everyone was rising from the dinner table, Cunegonde and Candide found themselves behind a screen. Cunegonde dropped her handkerchief. Candide picked it up. She held his hand quite innocently. He kissed her hand quite innocently, with remarkable vivacity and emotion. Their lips met, their eyes lit up, their knees trembled, their hands wandered. The Baron of Thunder Ten Trunk passed by the screen and, taking note of this cause and effect, drove Candide out of the castle by kicking him vigorously on the backside. Cunegonde fainted as soon as she recovered. The Baroness slapped her face, and everything was confusion in the most beautiful and agreeable of all possible castles. Perfect. The most beautiful of all possible castles. This highly refined air that they're all putting on, like, oh, we are so special, we are so cultivated, we are so sophisticated. They're really just a bunch of, backcountry rubes. Even in this environment, celebrating, the abstract philosophies of polite people, there's some nookie going on. They are still subject to the same human urges, the same human desires, the same animal instincts, you could even say, as anyone. They can put on all of the polite airs of high society they want, but when it comes right down to it, they are still very much horny little buggers. And the idea that this is all going on in this castle, which is just a house probably, not particularly large, not particularly opulent, and the underbelly of that polite society is showing here. That tension between how we want to see ourselves and how we really are fuels this story. And it's not hard to see the jokes. It's not hard to see it's not hard to see the strategy that this text is offering for how we should read this text, and consequently how we should read the world. This is a remarkable little chapter as an opening chapter because it is so fast. We get a lot of information really, really quickly here. None of it is particularly deep. All of it is surface level. Candide is little more than a cartoon. And you can think of it in those terms, where the behavior is very broad, the themes are very obvious, and the pacing is really, really fast, which makes it a lot of fun to read. A lot of the best comedies in world history are very fast-paced because that just makes things seem a little silly. Look at old movies, old silent movies, where they actually speed up the film and you see people running around and doing things really funny, and it's funny because it looks so silly because it's so fast. But also it's very efficient for our purposes. We don't need a lot of backstory. We don't need, let's get into Candide's psychology. Let's what was his childhood like growing up in that household where he doesn't really know who his own mother is? Oh my God. What are his motivations? What are his dreams? What are his hopes? Who cares? He's a cartoon character. And as a cartoon character, we can look at him quite objectively. We can look at him quite comfortably. We don't have to feel a lot of anxiety that this is reflecting on us necessarily, at the outset at least, because it seems so ridiculous. We can be objective about something that is not touching us. Certainly, we can laugh at ourselves a little bit because who among us has not tried to be very sophisticated at certain moments, but then at other moments, our cruder natures surface. And this is something that those of us broadly who have a bit of a sense of humor about ourselves and perhaps don't take ourselves too seriously can appreciate. But at the same time, this chapter gets us into the story setting up the basic dynamic of Cunegonde being, not Cunegonde, of Candide being clueless, of this society in general thinking it is so elevated when really they're just a bunch of doofuses, and the hilarity that ensues when you place too much faith in abstract ideas and not enough in the reality of nature, of human nature, of objective reality of a kind around us. This this dynamic is essential to understand as we go into this this narrative. This dynamic is everything as we go into this narrative, and the narrative is a lot more fun if you just give yourself over at the beginning to the absurdity